Can Hispanics be white nationalists? Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. The Rise of White Nationalist Hispanics. This was written by Axios. This was kind of being passed around in a in a way where people were joking about the headline. I will admit that it does sound ridiculous when you say it. And yet, at the same time, we have to try and break it out. And this is actually why I think so many of our labels around all of this doesn't make any sense at all. Like, can you be a white nationalist Hispanic? It's like, well, one of the interesting things is because I am from Texas, and I actually know third, fourth, and fifth generation Hispanics, is that the term white Hispanic does exist. And then you have people who have or are of Mexican descent, but whose families have lived in Texas since before Texans came, but through intermarriage and all of that, ethnically identify as white.
Right.
And so what do you do with that? I mean, I think in terms of our box checks and all of that, and this is also why I think all of our racial obsessiveness is ridiculous. I am effectively just coming around to, instead of can Hispanics be white nationalists, can Hispanics or anyone else be far right? Yeah. And I just think that that's a much easier and cleaner way of discussing it. What it's to me, the idea, here's the other thing. When you put it that way, can Hispanics be fascist? I mean, have you ever read the history of fascism? Where did all the Nazis go, people? It's not that hard to figure. Where were the last vestiges of far-right dictatorships, throughout the world? It doesn't take a genius whenever you put it that way. And also, there's all these questions about why you would even be inspired by the SS or the Nazi regime. Once again, many of these Latin American military dictatorships took direct inspiration actually from in some cases actually worked with the Nazis. Many of them even borrowed some of their ideology. Many people don't know this. Even the Nazis themselves, like the SS, for example, had divisions and people who were within it who were not German and who were not even Aryan. Mm-hmm. You had Serbia, Slavs who were members of the. Why? Because they bought into some, whatever the crazy ideology was, and it was actually kind of a controversy within the SS at the time. My point being is people who are crazy, murderous. Crazy, murderous fascists are not always the most ideologically consistent. And so, to me, I think it is easier to discuss and look at it as, can Hispanics, can Blacks, can Indians, can anyone be, quote unquote, far right, can be inspired by fascist, non-democratic politics, be racially discriminatory? Yes. And I think that's actually a very easy answer.
Well, and I mean, it depends on their definition of white nationalism, which is used all of the time in this super inflated sense. And now, of course, in this case, it looks like it hasn't been applied in an inflated sense. It looks like there's a legitimate case that this is somebody who believed he had an ideological formulation that allowed for Hispanics, as he says in his own meme.
Yeah, he put his own meme.
It's his own meme to be white nationalists. So if he thinks he can come to that irrational ideological formulation, by all means. To your point, though, by all means, that sounds like white nationalism to me. Right. But to your point, it is what Axios seemed to be doing with that article, and what you see on these front pages is this attempt to make it sound like something is extremely widespread when it is, in fact, a very small percentage of the population. It doesn't mean that can't be a dangerous, mobilized, animated percentage of the population, but we know right now that the establishment is inflating these definitions in order, very specifically, to justify surveillance of people who have dissenting viewpoints. And so I think it's an interesting conversation, right? And we could sit here and talk about, what constitutes Hispanic white nationalism all day. But when I see it coming from the press like this, again, we can't have an honest conversation about it because what they're trying to do is just say, well, we actually need to surveil all of you because, look, he's going to go to Russian social media.
Yes. This is also why it is difficult. This is also why I hate racial terminology in the United States.
Yeah.
For example, with Hispanic, the typical definition, I think, according to the U.S. Census, is somebody who is a person of Cuban, Mexican, Puerto Rican, South or Central American or other Spanish descent. Now, as Hispanics and people who are of, quote, Hispanic or Latino origin like to look at, for example, if you are from Spain, the odds are you are white and a mix of Moor. Mm-hmm. Now, are you Hispanic? I guess, under our definition. Are you a Spanish American? Like, once again, this is where it starts to break apart. And then through our race kind of obsessed media, they'll say like that person somehow has something in common with someone who is from Puerto Rico. It's like, well, yeah, maybe 500 years ago, not today. Or same thing with Puerto Rico versus somebody from Colombia who barely has just as much in common with somebody who is from Honduras. So like, just because you speak the same language doesn't mean actually that anything is going on. You ever been to Central America? I mean, even within Central America, you have a tremendous amount of ethnic diversity and cultural practices. They're not all the same. And I think that's why whenever I think and consider, all of this, it just is easier to actually take that element out of it and say, can anyone who is on the internet be inspired by far right ideology, far left ideology? Yes, actually, it's quite clear.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I think this is more of a meta conversation around how we can all discuss this without seeming like we want to blow our brains out. And it is a nuanced and interesting question around ethnicity, around race, around identification, and around what multiracial, heterogeneous societies look like. I mean, 150 years ago, if we were here in Washington, D.C., and we said that Irish people were white, white Presbyterians would be like, what are you talking? You're crazy. No, they're not. They're different. Or then if not even that long ago, if you said that, for example, Italians were white. Again, the Irish people would be like, no, we're not. We had nothing in common with them. 100 years ago, this all sounds ridiculous. So that's my point, is that these things can evolve. And in reality, like, it's more on us to try and make sense of this. And the last thing I guess I want to say is sometimes the semantics of the conversation themselves are so ridiculous because we haven't even spent enough time, media, and even here now, just honestly, honoring some of the victims. Some of these people were, a Korean-American family has been massacred. You got an orphan child. You got 3-year-olds who were killed. You have not only immigrants, but people who were born and raised here, who were murdered in cold blood, their lives taken and ruined. And, one of the alleged things that was said by the shooter was, the media always celebrates the people who was a shooter. They can't help themselves. The people who get killed never get as much attention. He literally said that in one of his alleged social media musings. So, and sometimes, it comes to the question of like, should we even be talking about this person? But because it has become such like a meta-cultural talking point, I almost feel like we have no choice. But it's always difficult every single time one of these happens, and it is a horrific tragedy.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.